Coming up, why Jasmine Hartin will almost certainly get bail. Plus, my 2 cents on why Patrick Faber needs to resign.
You're listening to Brent's 2 Cents, the semi-serious thoughts of a guy in Belize. And now here's the host of this podcast from somewhere in Belize City, Brent Toombs.
Hey, welcome to the podcast for the week of June the 7th. Well, if you've been wondering what happened to Brent's 2 cents for the past few weeks, I've been busy working out of town on back-to-back film productions. You see, that's how I put bread on my table. Podcasting is just a hobby. And fortunately, it seems that after a pretty disastrous 2020, the film business in Belize is finally starting to rebound. So hopefully that's a good sign for economic recovery, as film production and tourism in general tend to trend in the same direction. Of course, all of this hinges on Belize doing everything possible to prevent another massive spike in infections, like what we saw in November and December from last year. But sadly, the poor vaccination rate combined with the ever-increasing evidence of people just completely disregarding regulations on social gatherings suggests that a third wave of COVID-19 is probably just around the corner for Belize. But that's not what I want to talk about today. The big story that has gripped Belize for over a week is, of course, the shooting death of Police Superintendent Henry Jamot and the subsequent arrest of Canadian national and common law daughter-in-law of Lord Michael Ashcroft, Jasmine Hartin. Now, by now, I don't think there is anyone in Belize who isn't familiar with the basics of this homicide case. Jamot, who was a career police officer, and Hartin, the wealthy business and life partner of Andrew Ashcroft, were good friends. Such good friends, in fact, that they were socializing on a dock near the uber-luxury resort Aliyah in San Pedro that has been developed by Andrew Ashcroft and Jasmine Hartin. And as typically happens when good platonic friends are just hanging out on a dock after curfew hours, Ms. Hartin offered to give Mr. Jamot a shoulder massage. Now, at some point during the massage, Jamot, who was a highly trained police officer, allegedly asked the civilian, who had limited firearms experience, to hand him his licensed Glock pistol, to which Hartin obliged. But unfortunately for Jamot, instead of passing the weapon at, say, waist height, as one would expect, Hartin must have taken a much longer way around, by way of the back of Jamot's head, with her finger on the trigger. And wouldn't you know it, the darn gun went off completely by accident. Or at least that's Jasmine Hartin's version of events. A version of events that the police were quick to accept as the truth and nothing but the truth, so help them Lord. God. In less than 72 hours, the Commissioner of Police announced to the nation that the investigation into the shooting death of one of their own had been fully completed, and that the police would be charging Jasmine Hartin with manslaughter by negligence. Because that's what Hartin and her legal team told the police happened on that dock after curfew. No further investigation required. Now, normally it's the Director of Public Prosecutions that determines what charges will be laid based on evidence gathered by the police. So, at least for the sake of optics, the DPP took her time before concurring that the charge recommended by the police, as dictated by Hartin's defense attorneys, would indeed be manslaughter by negligence. Yeah, once again, the tail wags the dog in good old Belize. Now, the only real surprise to come from the arrest and arraignment of Hartin is the fact that the wealthy socialite was initially denied bail, and that a special Supreme Court bail hearing granted last week was adjourned until Wednesday of this week. So at the very least, Jasmine Hartin will spend 12 days behind bars first at the San Pedro Piss House, and then on remand at Her Majesty's Central Prison. But that will likely be the only time she will spend incarcerated in Belize for the death of Superintendent Henry Jamot. Now, I'm sure the DPP will make a perfunctory objection against bail based on Hartin being a flight risk, which, of course, she is. She has money. Her family has influence. Her father-in-law has a private jet and 2 yachts. Hartin, despite the charges against her, still has lots of friends in San Pedro. And let's face it, there are plenty of mercenary boat captains that would gladly smuggle Hartin out of the country for a few bucks. But I will be shocked if Justice Herbert Lord denies bail and directs Hartin to remain remanded to prison, for 2 reasons. First, the charge of manslaughter by negligence is a rather minor offense. Yeah, sure, the law says she could go to prison for a couple of years, but in reality, nobody charged with manslaughter by negligence ever gets much more than a fine of a few $1,000s. And that's really the second reason why Justice Lord will determine that Hartin is not a flight risk. Because she would be the dumbest woman on this planet to flee while on bail and become an international fugitive for the rest of her life, rather than just let the judicial dog and pony show play itself out and accept what will ultimately be nothing more than a slap on the wrist. The worst case scenario for Hartin will probably be a $10,000 fine, which is a drop in the bucket for anyone closely related to Lord Michael Ashcroft. But even more likely is that the entire case gets dropped due to sloppy police work and mismanagement by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. If you thought How to Get Away with Murder was only a TV show on ABC, then you have not been paying attention to the various ways the Belize Police and DPP office bungle cases, sometimes seemingly intentionally, to make sure that the conviction rate for homicide cases never climbs above single digits. And in this case, the police don't even have to try to screw things up. By rushing to close their investigation and bring about a charge of manslaughter by negligence, the cops have handcuffed themselves and prosecutors. Prosecutors will not have the burden of proving that Hartin intentionally shot Jamot or had any motive to harm him, because she won't be on trial for that. Normally, in a situation like this, the charge would be murder. And then, if the prosecution cannot satisfy the court that the threshold for murder had been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, a judge or jury could return a guilty verdict for a lesser offense, such as manslaughter. But in the Hartin case, the prosecutors will be going into court to try and get a conviction for the lowest charge possible. There is no room to reduce the charge or plead down. Hartin has already told police that she shot her good friend Jamot by accident. And now the only issue for the court to eventually determine is whether or not the police and DPP properly dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's. And if they didn't, don't be surprised when Jasmine Hartin walks out of court a free woman.
We want to hear from you. You can find Brent's 2 Cents on Twitter and Facebook at 2 Cents Belize, or email us at podcast@oshaproductions.com. That's OXA Productions with an S.com.
Okay, switching gears to politics now. And listeners of this podcast know that I love to talk about politics. I enjoy everything about it. I enjoy the sport of it, the internal power struggles of party politics, the strategies involved with trying to win the hearts and minds of Belizean voters. And while I almost always have strong opinions on anything political, I do try to stop short of publicly endorsing or denouncing any particular candidate, especially when it comes to the internal party business of either the UDP or PUP. But I'm going to make an exception. Patrick Faber needs to resign as the leader of the United Democratic Party. Now, just for full disclosure, I am neither a PUP or a UDP supporter. I have voted blue, I have voted red, and I have voted a few other colors on various ballots in the past. So this is not a political statement I am making when I say Faber is no longer fit to lead his party. Of course, I'm not the only person in the past week to suggest that Faber needs to resign. After a video of Patrick Faber embroiled in what appears to be yet another domestic violence situation emerged, the calls for him to step down as party leader have been numerous, including from people within his own party. Now, some of those UDPs calling for Faber to go may simply be exploiting the situation for their own political purpose. After all, Faber was not a popular choice with many of the most powerful members of the UDP. In fact, even after John Saldivar resigned in disgrace after only 72 hours as party leader back in February of 2020, he still enjoyed the support of the majority of the UDP area representatives and standard bearers. Despite all the allegations against Saldivar in the Lev Derman affair, Faber still barely managed to win when the second leadership convention was held in July of last year. So he has never been a very popular leader within his own party. And the ass beatings the UDP took in the November general and March municipal elections certainly did not improve his stature as party leader. But it's time that the UDP comes to terms with the big red elephant in the room. And it shouldn't be because they don't think they can win with Faber at the helm. It's time to do the right thing and take a stand against gender-based violence, starting with their party leader. Patrick Faber was always a morally flawed candidate. He has a history of anger issues involving women, with several different women. And no matter how many times charges get dropped or Faber claims that the incidents are being blown out of proportion for political purposes, you can't deny that there is a pattern. And just like Saldivar and his tranches of cash, where there is smoke, there is usually fire. In July of 2020, the UDP only had two choices on the ballot for party leader, Patrick Faber and John Saldivar. But now the UDP needs to do some serious soul searching and decide where they will set the bar morally for the leader of their party. Already, John Saldivar is seeing an opportunity to resurrect his leadership aspirations thanks to Faber's latest scandal. But if anyone in the UDP actually thinks that Saldivar would improve their party's chances of returning to power anytime in the next 10 years, they're nuts. As far as the current UDP caucus is concerned, I think only Tracy Panton would have any shot at bringing integrity to the office of party leader right now. Panton did release a statement supporting zero tolerance for all forms of violence, but she did not go so far as to mention Faber by name or call for his resignation. However, if the UDP really wanted to show that they're willing to change and demand more from their leaders in order to win back the trust of Belizean voters, I think the person they need to look at leading their party is former Belize City Mayor Daryl Bradley. But for whatever reason, Bradley is considered an outsider within his own party. In Belize, both mass parties are run like mafia families, and in the mafia, it's not easy to become a made man. So don't be surprised to see Patrick Faber stick around as party leader for a while longer. At least until the next viral video or allegations of a, quote, misunderstanding involving a baby mama or romantic partner comes to light. Okay, as always, it's time to big up all the other Belizean podcasters who have put out new content recently. The Belize Travelcast just dropped a new episode about the importance of preserving Belize's cultural and natural heritage. Andre Hibet and Digna Ramirez have a new episode of Mud of Fire where they talk about permaculture with my good friend Christopher Nesbitt from Maya Mountain Research Farm. Tyler J. Bermudez from the Real Thai Belize podcast keeps putting out a fresh episode every single Friday. His latest looks at not only the Jasmine Hartin case, but also the spread of COVID-19 in Belize's classrooms. Meanwhile, over on YouTube, Juan Reyna digs into Belizean history on a brand new episode of his podcast, The Blind Spot. And I found yet another Belizean podcast that I want to tell you about. It's called Belizeable Adventures. And this is a podcast by Monty from Texas and his Belizean wife Kim as they explore Belize together. I'll post links to all these podcasts in the notes for this episode. Remember, you can be part of the podcast movement in Belize by sharing Brent's 2 cents with at least one person who otherwise may not know about it. And don't forget to subscribe to all the great Belizean podcasts on your favorite app so you never miss an episode from any of us. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at 2 Cents Belize. And I would especially love it if you would leave a voice message for the podcast about anything you want to talk about. You'll find that link in the notes for this show. And that's going to do it for episode 32 of Brent's 2 Cents. Until next time, please continue to wear your masks, wash your hands, please get vaccinated, and most importantly, be nice to each other.
Brent's 2 Cents is a presentation of OSHA Productions, Belize's affordable professional video production company.